Luke Boyle is my guest today on Future Cities Africa. He's a researcher at the Urban Real Estate Research Unit at the University of Cape Town. Luke has a particular interest in urban innovation and sustainability in African cities. Luke, welcome. Give us a quick tour of your background and some major highlights.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me on your show. As you said, I'm a researcher at the Urban Real Estate Research Unit. I'm also just started a PhD at Arizona State University in the US, and it's in innovation and global development. So my background is in urban management and sustainability. The last couple of years, my research activities have largely been centered around cities in Africa and how they are harnessing technology to support urban development.
So with your recent work in Africa with regards to cities harnessing technology to support urban development and city government objectives, what are some country-specific examples that stand out to you, and what are some of the key lessons learned?
Yeah, there's quite varied application of the kind of smart city concept across the continent. I think by and large, it has primarily been around smart satellite cities, and which is a growing phenomenon across African cities. Basically developing smart, technologically advanced cities on the periphery or next to existing cities. So if you look at Eco-Atlantic outside Lagos, there's also Konza Technology City and Tatu City in Kenya, near Nairobi. But we also starting to see different typologies, such as what we're seeing in Cape Town, which is a more kind of embedded approach of basically using technology to further more broader, comprehensive urban development objectives. And to a lesser extent, Nairobi are doing this too. A lot of these kind of smart satellite cities, there's a strong emphasis on infrastructure, business parks, research institutions, and a lot of them are basically geared to attract foreign investment from big multinationals. And there's quite often a real estate development component to it. And these have been critiqued for really not addressing the lived realities of African cities and not really developing more endogenous forms of urban innovation and developing kind of homegrown grassroots development of technology and solutions.
So it seems that the term smart city has been taken out of context over the years. I'd love to know, what is your definition of a smart or smarter city in African context?
The term smart, I don't particularly like it. I know a lot of other people don't. What I think is perhaps more useful is because, technology and the way humans interact with technology and the way cities evolve, it's constantly in a state of flux. And any kind of definition tends to be kind of a snapshot in time or within a specific domain. So I feel it's more kind of useful to try and kind of examine the way that people and institutions and technology kind of interact within the urban space and try and kind of in that broad kind of category rather than really trying to pinpoint something on it. And then in terms of Africa, I think a lot of the technology that's put forward in the kind of smart city solutions, it's kind of just passed on to Africa as if we're just passive recipients of technology, and it's just a linear adoption of technology from west or north to south, which obviously isn't the case. I think we need to realize that kind of smartness doesn't center around technology, and there is a growing body of knowledge around that, and terms like the smart enough city or the smarter city are starting to gain a lot more traction. So it's about understanding that people live in cities, and it's how people respond to city that make it smart. And it's those socio-technical kind of configurations that actually what makes the city smart, and not purely the technology alone. So for me, I think what it could mean in Africa is actually really providing a platform for empowerment, providing a voice for people that do not have the access to skills or education, or historically have been denied access to those things. And I think it's about kind of trying to level those playing fields rather than develop some futuristic overlay on the existing African city.
Do we really need smarter cities in Africa? If so, why? If not, why not?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I recently wrote an article about kind of asking that question. And it wasn't to say that we don't need technology. I think, there are amazing opportunities that technology offers African cities or any city. And there's certainly merits to a lot of the visions that people put forward around smart cities and the technologies, although they are perhaps oversimplified and focus more on, maybe economic factors. But I think what we don't need is we don't need big tech or software developers defining how our cities develop. And I think what we need is a realignment of that and a combination of technological expertise with kind of local knowledge and experience and skills. And what a lot of what we've seen so far has kind of more represented the former of just a kind of an injection of technology. And I don't think that's particularly helpful in an African context. We've done fine without technology. Cities have done fine without such a strong emphasis on technology before. So yeah, I think a lot of this idea around technology in Africa is that, we need to catch up. This is the only way we can participate in the global economy. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. And I think what we are doing is missing an opportunity to really develop our own skills and talents around technology and come up with some amazing solutions ourselves.
So what do we need to do to be competitive on a global scale when it comes to talent, jobs, business, etc.?
It's a tough question. I suppose what we do need to do is it comes down to investing in human capacity development instead of investing in technology. I quite often like to use the example of Ed Glazer uses about Detroit and kind of those post-industrial cities in North America and much of the world, in fact, and how their focus was on kind of introducing kind of big iconic buildings and technologies and infrastructure to a city as it was declining in a way to save the city. But it's not technology that saves the city or creates a city, it's the people. And I think that's where we really need to start investing and providing opportunities and platforms for people. We have so many skills out there, but just not enough opportunities and platforms for those skills to be unleashed or harnessed.
So with regards to financing these future cities and these smarter or more efficient cities, what are some of the best ways of finding the money to do this?
I think as an academic, we're far more comfortable poking holes in solutions and providing them. But what we have noticed from our research and my research is that a lot of these initiatives are funded through kind of international development agencies, like your World Banks, your IMF, various other development banks. And what these funding options have been criticized for is that they tend to be quite kind of Eurocentric in their approach and their solutions that they offer, or they kind of fall within broader, say, infrastructure grants or funding, which kind of makes them quite specific to a certain domain. And the solution that's put forward is quite kind of technocratic. And there's a little bit of a disconnect there between what a city actually needs and what's being funded. So it does kind of create, okay, well, we have a very advanced wastewater treatment facility now, and we can kind of test the water for various things. And it's a kind of a leapfrog in that regard, but there's various other aspects of the city that are just far kind of underutilized. And it kind of creates this very hodgepodge approach. So I think what I would suggest is perhaps more of a strong leadership from a national perspective around these kind of strategies and smart city development. So in South Africa, we kind of yet to see that strong kind of political guidance, I suppose, on what a smart city is, or not even necessarily that explicit, but at least a kind of a political drive to this is what we want to achieve. We will allow funding for various regional governments and city governments to start actually defining for themselves what they would like to do in that regard, and providing a funding or budget so they can actually start to develop a more coherent strategy, which then they can tap into various international funding agencies and donor organizations to implement specific outcomes within that.
On the foundations for open data in South African municipalities, can you give us a snapshot overview, the current status and some future prospects?
So recently did a project on open data in South African municipalities, and basically trying to examine what's happening in the space and the issues that they might be encountering. And yeah, what we found is quite an exciting space, kind of a burgeoning open data tech ecosystem. And there's various organizations, like I'm sure you've heard of Open Up and Open Cities Labs and the Social Justice Coalition. The South African Cities Networks are getting involved and really kind of pushing an open data agenda. And VPUU also doing some great stuff around open data with their city spec. So there's some great stuff happening in the civil society space, but also in the public sector with city governments. And so Cape Town, eThekwini, and Kuruleni are the three kind of cities in South Africa now that are really starting to push this. And city of Johannesburg is also quite close behind. So yeah, some of the, I guess the foundations is kind of what I was looking at, what's needed to really kind of drive these platforms within a municipal context. And the first thing I think is strong leadership. You need someone in the political leadership who's able to link the objective, the open data portal, with kind of an identifiable goal, a broader goal within the kind of municipal structure, which hasn't been particularly well articulated, I feel, at this stage. And then, yeah, this person needs to champion it at both the political and the administrative level of the city. Another thing is for making open data effective, we need to balance the supply and demand of open data. So what I mean by that is, just because data is open, it doesn't mean it's accessible. And I don't just mean in the sense of having internet connectivity to download a data set, but also having kind of an understanding of how to use that data to inform decisions. And essentially that's what the purpose of that data is to help create more informed decisions. But if you don't really understand, or you can't make sense of that data, or the assumptions made, or how it was collected, or how it was analyzed, there's very little you can do to inform a decision around that. So that's something that came up with the research too, is just, instead of a municipality putting out a bunch of data sets that might have very little meaning or kind of be very difficult to kind of decipher, trying to understand how that data could be used by someone in an informal settlement, or someone in the suburbs that's trying to make a difference and trying to improve their living situation. Yeah. Another key aspect is capacity development within local government. What is great about the open data portals in the city governments is that it has really developed and pushed kind of a capacity development agenda around technology, around data sharing, around data skills, basic data skills. But it was a significant issue for many of the municipalities. And what ended up happening was the requirement of basically needing to partner with an organization like South African Cities Network, or OCL, to really kind of bring in that outside expertise to help them develop those platforms. Yeah, but I think, future prospects, I think it's a really exciting space. The civic tech space in Cape Town, or South Africa more generally, is really, it's an exciting space, and there's some really great people involved.
Despite the widespread adoption of and progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, Africa continues to lag behind most of the world when it comes to socioeconomic development. What are some of the key challenges that stand in our way, and how can they be addressed?
I think one of the main things is, we don't have very strong institutions in Africa. And I think what a lot of that results in is a lot of, people's mobilization and their willingness and to kind of change their communities falls on deaf ears. And there's a lot of frustration, and, a lot of media, you get a lot of media coverage around kind of public service protests, and a lot of negative attention towards that. And I guess for me, I see that these are people that are passionate about their community, and they are mobilized and wanting to make a change, a positive change for the community, but they have no options to be able to do so. And this is frustration, I think. And I see these things, and I see what a negative thing it is in South Africa, but how unfortunate it is that this cannot be harnessed into something more constructive, more positive. And I feel that these people do not feel empowered to be able to do that and to make a positive contribution. And I feel like we need to have institutions that can really start to facilitate that and to really be able to mobilize those people to be able to feel empowered to make a difference in their communities. So I think that's one thing that I think is a challenge that needs to be overcome. And I think, we still have a very long way to go in addressing issues around institutionalized racism and the legacies of institutionalized racism and colonialism. And, we're nearly 30 years into a democratic South Africa, and we're still, I don't think anyone would have thought we would be where we are now 30 years ago, in terms of how divided we still are and how unequal our cities are, spatially divided, how our education system does not provide equal access to education, and how the economy doesn't provide equal opportunities and potential for transformation. And I mean, that's not just the failings of politicians and government, but I think it would definitely have helped if there was stronger political leadership in terms of addressing those legacies.
How do you see cities change over the next 5 years, and what are some of the things that you are hoping to see?
I'm not going to speak specifics because I don't, to be honest, I don't know enough about the particular kind of the intricacies of technologies like autonomous vehicles and Internet of Things. But I think I'll speak more broadly about what I think I would like to see and what I think will be important in the years to come. I'm quite optimistic. Despite some of my critiques, I feel like there's a lot of positive change that's happening. We spoke about, civic tech, and I think we're starting to see like a groundswell really starting to emerge here around civic tech and developing human capacity around technology that can really push social agendas and really start to hold governments to account. So I think we already are starting to see, the buzz of the term smart starting to die down a bit, and people are starting to realize that these glitzy kind of satellite enclaves, they don't work, and they're not going to provide African cities what they need. So I think what I would like to see, and I think what will happen, is that we will start to look at technology and use what is practical and what is useful for a given context, rather than focusing purely on kind of cutting edge and this desire to be, on the cutting edge of technology. Would like to see then a more kind of a more balanced look at technology and less fantastical visions of what it looks like, and more around collaborative problem solving, participatory democracy, as you just mentioned, human scale development in African cities, the power of non-state institutions and how they can be more powerful and be more informed and hold governments to account in a much stronger way through the use of technology. And this is starting to happen already. So I think what will start to develop, what would I like to see, I would like to see in the next few years would be, people in Africa developing solutions for African cities, as opposed to, an IBM or Siemens kind of defining African cities. So that's the one thing. I think another big thing would be around issues of privacy and surveillance. It's not really talked about enough in the smart city discussions. I'm guilty of that myself. Many people are also just unaware of, the implications. And if you think about kind of safety and security, very few people would be against making cities safer. But what doesn't happen very often is reflecting on kind of safety and technologies and how they can be used for surveillance and discrimination. And I think, recently, if you look what's happening in less democratic countries in Africa, like in Uganda with Huawei, and the way that they've been providing technology and services for the Ugandan government to essentially spy on its citizens and using digital surveillance and censorship. And, recently in the media, it was Bobby Wine, his encrypted messages were intercepted. He's a political activist, and his cell phone data was used to track his whereabouts. And the frightening thing is that this isn't just happening in kind of less democratic nations. I think it was a couple of years ago, it was revealed that the South Africa State Security Agency have been conducting mass surveillance or bulk surveillance operations. I think it was since 2008. Yeah, so this is an issue that is going to come to the fore, I think, not just from a government perspective, but also I think from private sector's perspective. You know, the way that apps are surveilling us, the way search engines collect information about us, and how those companies use our data. So I think things around data ownership and data rights will also start to become more kind of important and more recognized. And then I think less directly related to technology, I think what will also happen is, I think maybe not necessarily in the next 5 years, but in the next couple of decades, I think the population growth of our major urban centers will start to plateau as they become increasingly unlivable. And I think that will start to be replaced by your secondary cities experiencing significant growth, at least a lot more so than your more established major urban centers, as the cons of living in an unviable and unlivable city will start to outweigh the benefits of being in such an urban environment.